My name is Micah, and I'm 32 years old, and I live in the Pacific Northwest. And I've been dealing with tick-borne illness since 2018. I got sick on December 3rd, 2018. I know that because my life changed overnight. I went from being a pretty high-functioning person, although not very healthy, to having issues concentrating, having issues with my memory, problems with my gut, insomnia, brain fog, night sweats, depression, anxiety, heart palpitations, fevers, severe histamine interactions is something that I figured out recently. The list is really long, and some of the symptoms I haven't felt in a long time. Others come and go. Neuropathy is another one. Nerve pain, tingling, things like that. I got bit, I believe, in Texas. I'm originally from West Texas, but I grew up mostly around Central Texas, the Austin area. My former partner and I lived not too far out in the country. It's about a 15-minute drive, I guess, into the Cedar Park area of Austin. Yeah, we had a dog together. In my opinion, the best dog on the planet. And the place where we lived was a little bit off any main roads, and off on a dirt road, and lots of trees and shrubs and tall grass, and deer, wildlife, coyotes, raccoons, you name it. And so growing up, I never really thought about ticks. I don't remember learning about them at any point in time, so I didn't really know what to expect about that. But there was one week around October of 2018. My former partner and I had been pulling ticks off of our dog, and I remember the first one I pulled off. I pulled it off and I didn't know what it was, and so I asked my partner, and she told me, "Oh, that's a tick." And I immediately got very disgusted because I'd seen them before, but on deer, and I would never have touched one if I knew what it was. And so I got rid of it, and then we'd found a few more on the dog. Fast forward maybe a couple weeks from then, and my former partner had now what I know to be a bullseye rash. And it really freaked me out because I'd never seen anything like it, and so we didn't really know what to make of it. She asked her doctor about it, and the doctor told her that it was a spider bite and nothing to worry about. She has very fair skin, and so it was incredibly obvious that it was a bullseye looking back on that. And if a physician had been trained in what that rash is, then it would have been incredibly obvious that that was something that needed to be treated right away. And the implication then would have been oh, well, if she has a bite, you've been finding ticks on your dog has a bite. So the EM rash is a classic sign of Lyme disease. I have much darker skin. I don't know that I would have ever noticed. I never found a tick on me, but they're very sneaky, and they burrow in all kinds of areas that many people might not think to see, and if you don't know about ticks, then you're not going to be looking for them. So here I am. So October 2018, finding ticks on the dog. Fast forward to December 3rd. I was in Atlanta. I had just gotten promoted. I worked for a company called Instacart, and I had to go out of town for a business retreat, or a work retreat, to meet new people and learn new things, and it all seemed very exciting at the time. And then it turned into a nightmare very quickly. I got really sick. I had, what I presume is my first real panic attack, and I thought I was dying. I was having heart palpitations, so I thought that I was having a heart attack or some kind of cardiac event. I didn't know. It was on my own, largely. Couldn't find any of my coworkers to help me. I remember I started feeling really unwell at dinner time, and the first indication that I was like having a panic episode was I used to have like terrible anxiety about leaving my partner alone. I just thinking that something bad was going to happen if I left, or just kind of expecting the worst, like intrusive thoughts kind of thing. I remember out of nowhere I couldn't get a hold of her on the phone, and I was like freaking out, and I just kept trying to call in a very irrational way, and I couldn't really make sense of it, but I just felt like something was wrong, but I didn't realize that it was just something happening within me. And so I ended up, getting her on the phone and like figured out like everything was okay, and but was still feeling very uneasy, and went back to my hotel and started feeling really, really awful. I don't think I really spiked a fever, but I started feeling like fever-ish, and body chills and aches and heart palpitations, and like my heart just felt like it was beating out of my chest, and I couldn't get regulate my heart rate. And then it started skipping beats. Lots of times when I get sick or like a flu or something, I'll take some Tylenol or whatever to just like relieve some symptoms, and I'll be able to get some sleep. That did not work this time, which was really scary. So I tried to fall asleep and I just couldn't. My brain would not shut off, and I had at the time never experienced anything like that. And I just felt like something was very wrong. And so there was a hospital across the street from my hotel, and I got up at like 3 a.m. and I walked to the hospital, and it was December, and I didn't take a jacket with me on that trip because I was like, well, I'm going to be inside most of the time, and I was freezing cold. I couldn't find the entrance to the emergency room. Eventually I found the entrance to the ER. I told them that I was having issues with my heart or my chest. I didn't know. They got me back very quickly, and they ran an EKG on me, they did blood work on me, and everything came back normal. Even my temperature, I wasn't running a fever, but I felt like hot, like I was on fire, like I just didn't feel well. And, they kind of checked my body a little bit for rashes, they checked my ankles for swelling, essentially chalking it up to like, oh, you're having a panic attack. And so I was like, that's never happened before, so it sounds a little strange, but maybe. So eventually they discharged me. I went back to my hotel room, and then it just continued to get worse from there. Then I did spike a fever. I started, sweating, and still could not sleep. I didn't sleep for about 3 days. I know that because when I got back to Austin, finally, it continued happening, the heart palpitations. Went to the hospital a second time back in Austin. Same thing. Doctor told me, like, there's nothing wrong with your blood work, having heart palpitations, like, but your EKG is coming back normal. There's really nothing that we can do for you. And so then I told him I haven't slept in 3 days. Like, what is happening? And, they chalked it up to anxiety again. So they gave me lorazepam, and that's the only way that I could sleep early on. It was terrifying. And my symptom list at that time was just absurdly long. I can't even express, like, I think I had it in an email somewhere that I had sent to someone just when I was just seeking help and answers. And it's disturbing to think how long that list was. So that's how I got sick, and how I knew something was very wrong. My life changed just overnight, and I haven't been the same since. And it's been about 5 years. in between then and now, like I've had some days where I feel normal. I've had experiences that have been very good, and I've also had really, really awful experiences, both health-wise and personally. But this illness is a nightmare. It is, as I call it, AIDS 2.0. The trouble that you have to go through just to get a diagnosis, and then seeking treatment, and then the lack of knowledge among the medical community, and the disregard in the medical community, and then, you know, by extension, people who just don't believe you. Very disheartening, and it's a hard, difficult path to continue on when you feel like people don't believe you, and even more certainly when people don't understand the gravity of what it is that you're dealing with. Like, I can't possibly explain what I deal with day to day to people who don't know how it feels. Like, the anxiety and the fear and the like uncertainty of like how I'm going to feel just like when I wake up in the morning. There's like such a lack of consistency, and some days I feel honestly pretty okay. And I say that phrase in a way that makes me laugh, because it's like, well, yeah, most any sentient being can get used to most any circumstances, and we find ways to survive and compartmentalize and mask and just get through the day. And then sometimes you get to a point where it's hard to continue to find reasons to continue. And this isn't me saying that I'm suicidal or anything like that. It's about finding the will to just keep going under the pretense and the hope that it's gonna get better. And there are just so many instances and experiences that, you know, put you in a place to make you think like it's not getting better. And then occasionally you get a taste of like what it's like to kind of be normal. And those are the really good days. Yeah, those are the really good days where you really have to soak it up and get things done that you just have to get done. Sometimes, yeah, it turns into like a chore day, because it's like, oh, today I'm feeling okay, so I should probably get this thing done that I like haven't, this thing that has felt insurmountable for however many weeks or months I've been putting it off. And that, you know, is not unique to Lyme disease. That, I think, is a symptom of depression and can be misconstrued as apathy or laziness. And I talked about this with a friend recently who struggles with depression, and I know how that feels. Like, I've experienced that a lot over the course of my journey, and it comes and goes. Some days it's really bad. Most of the time it's just like a dull disinterest in most things. Recently I have been working on more projects, playing guitar. You know, this is a project that I've been wanting to do for a long time. Like most things and most people, I find excuses to not do it, or just get busy, I guess, which is, you know, just another excuse. For the last few months, though, I've been in really, really rough shape. Fortunately, I have a really great doctor, and they have been helping me kind of piece myself back together after, on one hand, after the end of a marriage. On the other hand, like all the stress that came along with that. On another hand, damage that I have done to my body, separate from dealing with tick-borne illness. That's on me. Essentially using alcohol as a coping mechanism, as a way to just numb a lot of pain, whether that's emotional or physical, or the way that Lyme and Bartonella, well, here's my infection list. Lyme disease, Bartonella, Babesia, and Rocky Mountain spotted fever, the ones that I know of. So the way that those things affect the brain. I'd actually recorded a version of this previously, and I was in, I think, a much more emotional state, if you can imagine that. And there were just so many moments where I forgot what I was going to say, and I lost my train of thought, and that's just what it does to your brain. But also, it just sucks the life out of you. Your personality goes, your creativity goes, and your ability to have interest in things. One of the toughest things is trying to find the energy and the will to just keep going. The intention of these videos is, for me not to ego cast. I honestly hate talking to a camera. I hate being in front of a camera. I feel like telling my story is so important, and not because it's just mine, but because it's so similar to so many other people's stories. Over the last few months, I've connected with a lot of people who are dealing with a lot of the same infections, some different infections, some conditions that are much, much worse than mine. Not that it's a comparison or some kind of contest to see who's worse. It's all of these things are awful, and none of us asked for this. None of us deserve this, but our quality of life is horrific. It's not just about your living situation, it's what you deal with day to day. So much of it is rooted in neurological issues and brain fog and pain. One thing I can say that I'm grateful for is that I don't have a lot of physical pain very often. Sometimes I do. Sometimes I'll get really intense neuropathy or burning sensations in my feet, pains in my shins, and that's from Bartonella. Sometimes I'll get shooting pains in my chest. Very occasionally I'll get shooting pains in my, what feels like my brain is just splitting in half. Those are fairly few and far between. Also just kind of sensitive to touch. If I have an itch on my leg, it's always my legs that have been sensitive. Then I'll scratch it, or I'll have to massage sometimes my muscles for some reason, and it just feels like an intense burning pain after I'm done, and then that kind of swells in intensity, and then it very, very slowly dies down, and it's incredibly annoying and off-putting. In talking with people who are dealing with a lot of the same things, so many of the stories are so similar, and in particular our experiences with speaking with physicians and trying to find answers and get a diagnosis and get help is that oftentimes it leads to a dead end. And then what do you do then? And it seems to be a relatively small percentage of people that come to the conclusion, when you've crossed everything else off the list, what is left? And you come to find out about tick-borne illness and how elusive it is as a diagnosis, and how random and seemingly presenting in different ways day to day, these symptoms that come and go, and but specific to a set of bacteria that affect you in the ways that are actually very specific. But even so, being told by physicians that that's not what you're dealing with, that it's not possible that that's what you're dealing with, that the area that you live in doesn't really have that problem, even though diagnoses are recorded and that becomes public information. It's a really, really big issue, trying to get a diagnosis and then having it acknowledged in a way that allows you to get treatment fairly and promptly. And it's a massive failure on the medical industry and on physicians. Before I got sick, I trusted doctors because I wanted to be one when I was younger. In high school, had a focus on health science technology, and I got my phlebotomy certification. I got my CNA license straight out of high school, and I started college thinking that I was going to be pre-med. And to make a very long story short, it didn't work out because I lacked focus and discipline. And just being honest with myself, at that point in my life, I couldn't have possibly succeeded at that. No matter how smart I was, I didn't have the commitment, and I was distracted by drinking and being irresponsible and focusing on things that college kids focus on. And it took me a really long time to grow out of that. So in taking those things into account, when I got sick, like, that part of my brain kicked in that was like, no, this isn't me. I refuse to accept that, regardless of the training and the expertise that these physicians may have, people make mistakes, and sometimes doctors get it wrong, and the authorities in different fields, like, get it wrong. That is a thing that happens, and this is one of those things, and they are failing an entire population of people in so many ways, and in so many awful ways. You know, this is the intention of these videos is to raise awareness and talk about my story in a way that relates to what's actually happening in the real world, outside of the confines of this van, which is my house. And it's all incredibly relevant, because as the climate continues to change, these bacteria, these illnesses, are showing up in places that they didn't used to, and the population of people who are getting sick with these things is growing, while at the same time the number of doctors who are willing to treat them and take them seriously is dropping fast, like alarmingly fast. And while there are groups of people out there that are trying to make a difference for the Lyme community and tick-borne illness community and raising awareness, by and large, it's still falling by the wayside. And in the next 10, 15, it's already an issue. In the next 10, 15, 20 years, it's going to be an even bigger issue, because people aren't going to know how to treat it, and there's going to be more and more people who are just non-functional human beings. You know, I'm pretty high functioning for the things that I'm dealing with. Nowhere close to what I could potentially be if I were not sick. And I say that very seriously. I'm not much for stroking people's egos, least of all my own. I think a lot about the things that I could do if I weren't dealing with all of these issues that I have. And it's really sad. So yeah, that brings me to like another point that I've had to contend with over the last few years, and something that didn't really hit hard until I said it out loud to somebody. And I was talking about this with that friend that I mentioned before, just recently. And I told them something that I grappled with for a while, that I had to accept, was that I can never be the person that I thought I was going to be when I was younger. And I will never be that person again, whoever I was before I got sick. It's just not possible. There's been too much damage to my body. There's been too much trauma. I've gone through too much, spiritually, emotionally, physically, for it to be possible for me to continue being that person. That part of me that used to be that life that I had before, I'm never gonna get it back. That person is dead. And right now, this is my new normal. And my new normal has changed over the last 5 years. You know, it was really bad in the beginning. That is the new normal that I hope I never have to deal with again. It's still not great. It's better than it was. And the way that I describe it is, I used to have 0 good days, and now I have some good days. And whether that's like 40, 60, 40 good, 60 bad, or 50-50 even, or sometimes it's 30-70. Sometimes it's less than that. It really it changes. I'll take good days anytime, and I don't take them for granted anymore. So yeah, this first video is largely unscripted, and I'm just it's a stream of consciousness to put the idea out there, and to also kind of give myself feedback for when I post this, and learn from the experience. I've made other YouTube videos before, and that was a learning experience. I've never done ones where I'm talking to a camera because I don't like to. I'm a pretty private person. I don't like people in my business, and this is the most not private thing that I could possibly do. While I want to be as transparent as I can, there are going to be some things that I won't feel comfortable talking about or mentioning, and people's names, and finding a balance between what I should share and what I shouldn't. But largely, I think it's far more important for me to discern what the reasons are for me sharing specific things versus not. And I think that's going to boil down to what kind of effect I think it can have, and how it can kind of help people form an idea in their heads of what these illnesses actually do to people, why it's an issue, and kind of dismantle any preconceived notions or notions that this isn't real, because it's very real. And oftentimes when I speak to people who are dealing with the same things, who haven't been dealing with it for very long, or have been dealing with it for a long time, they just didn't know what to call it, or don't have a diagnosis, they are very beat down and defeated. And then when I tell them hey, you're not crazy, this is very real, and I've been dealing with it for this long, and then I know people who have been dealing with it for 30 years, and then it's they're kind of inducted into a new group of people that they didn't even know existed, and it's wow, this is a real thing. So yeah, I'll have to balance that, because this goes against a lot of what I believe in as an individual, which is I don't consider myself the kind of person that needs to share every thought that pops into my head, or put all of my emotions out for the world to see. On the other hand, I feel this is something that's really important, and I feel we're headed down a really dangerous path of not being able to do anything about this, and a lot more people getting sick and suffering as a result of something that is widely misunderstood and widely dispelled, told by the medical community that it's not real, but it is. So with that, I think I'll have some other clips included in here, but that's, I think, my beginning spiel.